And thank you for watching this short video about incorporating EDI into your research-related grant applications. My name is Stephanie Brooks, and I'm the Program Officer for EDI at the Office of the Vice President, Research and Innovation. If you still have questions regarding EDI in your grant application after this video, you can contact me. My information is on this slide. I also encourage you to look at our office's EDI webpage. There are many other resources to help you with EDI in your research, and you also have your research partners and the research partner network in your departments and faculties to reach out to. They have a lot of expertise here as well. In this video, I'll give a brief overview of different EDI topics that are most often required in your grant applications, and I'll also answer some frequently asked questions. So here are some common expectations that energy research funders have for EDI in the research that they fund. They're looking for research that aims to transform energy systems in fair and environmentally responsible ways. They expect EDI to be incorporated throughout your research because EDI strengthens research quality. They want to fund researchers who lead their team in equitable ways by granting equal opportunities and the highest respect to their staff. Equity is about fairness in access to the opportunity to succeed. To engage in equity work is to recognize that systemic forms of marginalization exist and to be committed to dismantling these systems. So in research, equity begins by identifying the structural barriers within a particular discipline, and then involves committing to concrete actions intended to remove these barriers so that historically excluded or equity denied groups have full access to meaningful opportunities. And for researchers specifically, EDI is about designing our research in ways to reflect and benefit our diverse Canadian population. Diversity is the different human characteristics, conditions, and features that lead to differences in our experiences and our needs. In research, diversity refers to the differences in demographics, levels of experience, social identities, and the different perspectives that people can bring to the research process. Part of committing to EDI is to value these differences and to understand that diversity will strengthen your research by incorporating different backgrounds and perspectives. Inclusivity is the process of meaningfully engaging with individuals from all backgrounds, including those from equity-denied groups. In a research context, inclusion entails ensuring that all the researchers, all the research team members are meaningfully engaged, are represented in all areas of the research process, and benefit equally from the process and the outcomes of your research. Diversity and inclusion are two components that make up equity. So when we value diversity and commit to inclusion, we can work towards removing those barriers that deny different groups justice and success. So how does EDI show up in energy research? Energy-related research includes a lot of projects with the potential to change a lot of people's lives in positive ways. Nevertheless, energy research often misses the opportunity to bring maximum benefits to the widest range of people possible. So here at the U of A, there's already so much high impact, high benefit research underway. Incorporating EDI is not about changing the narrative of your work. Rather, it's about working in a way that you know that you've covered all of your bases and that you are positively impacting the widest range of people possible. It helps to develop your innovations. It helps you develop your innovations in ways that are sustainable, affordable, and accessible. And all of these things are EDI related. And you're likely already doing this work. So this presentation is really about helping you articulate these elements of your work in grant proposals. In energy research grant applications, you may be asked to comment on your EDI actions in your research environment or your team composition. Both of these terms refer to how you run your lab or your office. You could also be asked how to incorporate EDI into your research design. For energy research, this is really asking about how your research is designed to positively impact Canadian society, including historically marginalized populations. People are far more familiar with EDI in research environments, so I'm going to start with EDI in research design. So remember that In energy research, EDI is about creating projects that will create the greatest benefit to society. So to do this, I suggest following 3 guided questions. First, ask yourself, if I finish this project as currently designed, who will benefit and who will miss out? You can see who could benefit if you found ways to incorporate new elements to your research that would um, widen your impact. For example, Alberta Energy Research will often be working in northern areas near or on Indigenous lands. So that's a very important and common population that has to be accounted for in your research design. Other questions are, how can this project reduce systemic inequities? And how can this research challenge existing social and economic disparities? And here we're talking about how energy impacts people's day-to-day lives. Will your innovation create energy that's more affordable? Will it create energy systems that are more sustainable? Who will have access to the energy that you're producing? Will these changes change the quality of life for Canadians? If so, which Canadians? Again, who is being left out? And is there a way to make this available to them too? These questions are set up in a way that if answered, you can articulate how you're improving Canadians' lives. And you'll have strong research design both from an EDI and a scientific perspective. So here are a few frequently asked questions about EDI in energy research design. These 2 questions are similar. They are asking about how to balance EDI and scientific elements in your grant applications. So in the Office of the Vice President, Research and Innovation, we review grant applications year round, year after year. And we've noticed that applications that integrate EDI rather than treat it as distinct from other sections have higher success rates. So to both of these questions, I would say it's not about the proportion of the application that is used for technical elements versus EDI, but how well you're able to integrate the two. When you integrate EDI into your methods, it will strengthen your research significance so that you really shouldn't have to give up anything in your scientific focus, but rather EDI is a way that you can articulate how relevant it's going to be and the potential impact that you're going to make in your research. Like I said in the previous slide, identify who will benefit and state that throughout your proposal. In energy research, one very clear and tangible positive impact is increasing the affordability of energy. So, and especially to economically disadvantaged regions, which are most often rural and remote communities, right? So one way to come up with ideas about how to do this is to engage with these different communities. Which leads me to this question, how can I demonstrate meaningful engagement? Meaningful engagement is an active EDI. So consult with the community, ideally throughout the research process. This will help generate ideas before you start writing your grant applications and will help you receive impact or feedback from the communities who will be impacted by your research. This will demonstrate inclusion and will strengthen the scientific focus rather than detracting from it when you write up why you came up with this question and how you're going to go about answering it. The tricky thing about engagement is figuring out the level of involvement that makes sense between you and the different interest holders. You need to find that sweet spot of meaningful engagement. You don't want to steamroll people, but you also don't want to tokenize them. You don't want to let engagement turn into a muck where nobody can make any concrete decisions. You still have to lead the project. So on this slide, will see different levels or categories of involvement ranging from competing to integrating. So to meaningfully engage will often require discussions with the people who are impacted by the proposed research. Ask the interest holders if they want to be involved and to what degree. And then you can honor these conversations and report the various partners and their involvement in your grant applications. This will show that you've meaningfully and thoughtfully engaged with the community and have really taken their concerns and how this research will impact them seriously. I suggest looking at the Tamarack Institute's guidance on the collaboration spectrum. This guidance has definitions of each level of involvement and ideas of how to actually perform these different levels of involvement once you get there. And then as the research progresses, you could consider different things like developing community advisory boards made up of local leaders or recruited from existing boards of elected councils. You could also hold community consultation events at strategic time points throughout your research. And either way, commit to giving the community updates and receiving feedback at key decision points throughout your project. And show this work in your grant applications. In your application, you can show that what you're saying you will do, that you're taking this seriously, by saying, how will you course correct if the feedback that you receive isn't reinforcing the approach that you've taken? What kind of feedback are you looking to receive from who? Are you looking to receive feedback from traditional beneficiaries as well as marginalized people who could potentially benefit? Are you talking to both rural and urban communities? And is your work going to reduce the gap between these different communities in terms of access to energy, affordability of energy, sustainability of energy, all of these different types of things? Now, this question is an excellent question. How do I identify and define community stakeholders in a research proposal? This should be thought through in any research project in any discipline. So there's a 3-step process to help you with this. And I highly recommend going through this process with your team, with your trainees, your co-investigators, because this is an exercise where diversity will really help. First, you want to simply brainstorm and make a laundry list of your interest holders. Here are 6 categories of interest holders who might interact with your different energy-related research. This is a non-exhaustive list. Lean on the diversity of your team to think through who else might be interested or impacted by your research. Next, list your research holders and think about what you need from them and what they need from you. From an EDI perspective, think about how each interest holder can benefit from your research and which interest holders have traditionally been denied benefits from energy research, which have traditionally benefited. And how can your research start to close this gap? Finally, map your interest holders based on their level of interest on the bottom and their level of influence on the Y. And you can start to see, who has high influence and high interest. Should those people be direct research partners for you, and why? Is it simply because of their influence? That's a totally reasonable reason. Are they low influence but high interest? This is often where marginalized groups will live, but not necessarily. Make sure that you're being accurate when you're doing this exercise. And then when you see where different people live, you can say, for what reason do we want to involve these different stakeholders at these different levels? And it will totally depend on your project and your EDI goals. But this is how you can start identifying and really thinking through who do we want involved at what level in this research. Any which way, this process makes it much easier to think through who should be involved and at what level, to reach out to them to see if they're willing to collaborate and have the interest and ability to be involved at the level that you suggest. Okay, moving on to research environment or team composition. I personally prefer the term research environment because it helps us focus on the process of managing labs and offices in an equitable way. Team composition is kind of distracting because it suggests an outcome of an equitable team or a diverse team, when EDI is really more about process than anything else. Nonetheless, there are 5 federally recognized groups of underrepresented people listed here. So when you're making your research environment plans, you can use this list to help ensure that you're not perpetuating inequities with these groups. And there may be other groups that are historically underrepresented in your field. This is just a starting place. The most common issue that we see when reviewing grants is vagueness around EDI practices. The easiest way for you to stand out from other applications is to be specific about how you're addressing EDI. Exactly what actions are you taking to ensure fair hiring and inclusive research spaces? The Office of the Vice President Research Innovation has developed a helpful resource called the EDI Framework for Research Excellence. This has guidance for both research environment and design, and it also includes some best practices around hiring, managing your lab. And this resource may be helpful for you to find some language to really articulate exactly how you're going to incorporate EDI into your work. A couple of pitfalls to avoid include general statements of your EDI commitment. Like I said in the previous slide, be explicit about your actions. This includes talking about your training. It's not enough to say that you've completed XYZ training. Tell the adjudicators that you'll leverage the knowledge that you've gained to run your lab in an equitable way. Similarly, referencing university policies and supports is wise, but emphasize what you and your team will do to ensure equity, diversity, and inclusion in your research lab or your office. If you have to make space, focus on what you're doing instead of what the university is doing generally. This is a great question. My team is very small. How can I write an authentic and impactful EDI statement? I suggest coming back to process. It's not about the demographics of your team. It's about how you manage your team. So here are some prompts to think about concrete practices that might be possible for you to take. Again, this is not exhaustive. If you're doing other things to support EDI, for sure, include that in your application. Adjudicators don't actually have a preference for which processes you undertake as long as they make sense for your team and the way that the research that you need to complete. Okay, so this question, how do I address representation gaps within the research team? And they specifically acknowledge Indigenous communities. This is a tricky issue because, if you're doing a project that intersects with Indigenous communities, you need to engage with these communities in ways that will create reciprocal benefit. This type of research is not possible without partnership. What I'm saying is, if you're asking this question, your project is probably not ready for grant funding, and your time is better spent doing this engagement work rather than trying to strategically get past this issue in your grant application. Engagement with Indigenous communities takes a lot of time, but it's necessary if your research intersects with these groups. And this type of work is inherently collaborative. You really can't get around it. So I suggest talking to your colleagues who have successfully partnered with Indigenous communities to learn more about the process, and then decide if your original idea is possible, feasible, or if you might have to rework it in some way. But yeah, partnering with Indigenous communities is absolutely necessary for research that impacts them. One thing that you will likely be asked to include in your grant application is a statement about how you measure EDI actions. Now, this will totally depend on how you run your lab and your office, your decisions around your EDI actions. But one thing is for sure is that the adjudicators do not want demographics of your team. And in many cases, at the tri-agency level or in other applications, they'll actually throw away your application if you include these demographics. And the reason for this is because you can't require your team to tell you about their social identities. It's their business, and there are very serious risks to collecting and sharing this data publicly. So again, focus on your process. Don't worry about the demographics of your team. Here are some suggestions about how to track and report your EDI processes. But again, really think through how you're operating your lab in your research space, and think about the different ways that monitoring your actions works for you. Okay, so I hope that this rundown helps with your grant applications, and that you feel more confident in writing your EDI statements and integrating it throughout your grants. Please be sure to connect with your research partners in your department or faculty in the Research Partner Network, or the Office of the Vice President in Research and Innovation if you need additional support.